Okay, I've got a public service announcement here.
Oh, a PSA.
A PSA about this DBX.
Oh, a DBX PSA. Okay, hit me.
A DBX PSA. Remember the fuzzy, garbled, I don't know what you want to call it, my audio issue.
I mean, it wasn't, you sounded not like it didn't sound like most audio corruption. It sounded real weird.
Yeah, there's a tiny little taste of it at the end of, I believe, episode 272. Oh, sorry, 271. 2 episodes ago, I believe, like at the very tail end. If you really want to hear what I'm talking about, but it just sounds like my audio gets kind of fuzzy, crunchy, rough, something, and analog interference-y sort of.
Yeah, it's not like there's a sound that a voice meter makes when it conks out, or like a certain USB audio interfaces make when it's not at all that one. That's all I know.
Okay. Well, now you know what it's not.
Yeah, and it's not like a loose connection on an XLR cable or a headphone jack or something like that.
Sounds electrical in nature. I'll say that.
Yeah,
analog-y.
Like I imagine if you brought like a big giant magnet next to a cable that didn't like to have big giant magnets next to it, and then also applied some juice to that magnet, maybe.
There's every possibility it'll happen while I'm in the process of describing it, which would be incredibly appropriate.
It's not going to happen. I'm sorry.
Anyway, I've been trying to troubleshoot this for a while. It's very intermittent. We talked about it on here. I also was talking to Vinny about it, and he dug up a couple of YouTube videos. He's got one of these things too, actually. So does Alex. We all bought it.
Oh, you all have them.
The DBX 286S. Anyway, a couple of YouTube videos and then a couple of forum threads on Reddit and a place called gearspace.com.
Okay.
Which, like, you can probably guess Gearspace is a pretty hardcore audio production forum.
Yeah, I bet those people have flangers.
I bet they do. I bet they flange all day long.
Yeah, but they're constantly flanging.
Anyway, the upshot is this problem I'm having is incredibly widespread on this unit. Incredibly so. Like, maybe dozens of people in that thread talking about it happening. And a couple, like I said, at least a couple of YouTube videos I found of people having it and trying to repair it.
And there's no like firmware or anything. This isn't a digital thing. This is an analog thing.
Entirely an analog electrical.
Oh, here you go.
It's just got a power plug and audio ins and outs on it. That's it.
Look, so the good news is you have a pine sol. You're ready to go.
So yes, it does in fact come down to soldering issue. People have determined that thing is just pretty poorly made. Like the soldering is just bad on it.
Oh, that sucks. Did they blame lead-free solder? That's always my favorite, is like, hey, millions of companies managed to make a bunch of shit with ROHS lead-free solder. No problem. But whenever some small volume place is like, yeah, the solder is bad because lead-free solder just blows. We can't do anything about it. I'm sorry.
I don't know where the fault lies. I don't know if they just cheaped out on the manufacturing or what, but I can tell you that one forum thread is years old and there are still people after a period of multiple years coming in with the problem. And I just bought this one in November. So I don't think they fixed their production lines or whatever's going on here. But the one guy on YouTube fixed the problem by basically reflowing every chip on the board.
Oh, God. How many chips are on the board?
Maybe not all of them. I kind of scraped. His video was like 30 minutes long of him testing chips on the board.
Oh.
I didn't actually verify it was every single chip, but he definitely did reflow multiple ones. Apparently fixed the problem just fine. Now it works great. So like, hey, what kind of soldering station do you got? Do you want me to come over with this DBX?
That is more soldering than I am willing to do.
Okay.
But I will tell you, the first electronics flea market is just like 2 months away.
Oh, that's true.
And you could get an oscilloscope down there. Like you could have a full on like EE workstation that you don't know how to do any of the stuff with, but it looks real cool and makes you look like you know what you're doing.
Well, much like several other projects around here, I'll buy all the stuff and then sit there and look at it for 5 years.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, the guy, I think it was one of the YouTube videos, a guy said that you could get like a decent little reflow station off of AliExpress for like $80, but
yeah. So you can get a reflow stations aren't particularly expensive. You can get even cheaper than that, that are fine for small work. Twinkle Twinkie talked about this when we were talking about, I can't remember, maybe when I was talking about mouse switches 100 years ago. But yeah, what it is it's like a hot air gun that gets hot enough to melt the solder and suck it away from the joint, so you can clean off a joint entirely, and then you have to resolder all the stuff. And you can probably, like, I assume that it's all edge mount stuff, so you can probably drag solder it.
So this guy actually didn't even resolder stuff. He used the existing solder on the board. He just
heated it up.
He just heated it and kind of like reseated the chip, centered it over the pads, and just kind of let it reset.
Give it a good wiggle.
And yeah, because he went through with a pick and like determined, like, he found a couple of pins that were pretty noticeably loose and not really making contact with the board very well. So
Let me ask you a more relevant question: are you still inside the return window for this device?
That's the thing. If I were, it would just go back, but I'm not. And one of the other YouTube guy who posted about it had sent his back for RMA repair.
Yeah, and let me guess, didn't get fixed.
It worked for a while and then started going bad again.
Weird.
Yeah, so that's not a great option either. I don't think. I might just buy something else.
I mean, I think like you could share the love on this one and just pass it on to somebody else on the used market and, make a better choice.
Yeah. Anyway, I just want to put the PSA out there.
Oh, there went. It did it for just a second.
Wait, are you serious?
Yeah.
Okay, that's staying in then because that could not be more poetic. It's striking back at me. It's trying to take revenge for talking mess about it.
We edit so many of these out every month.
It's well, I mean, sort of. I mean, it's
not that bad lately.
I mean, I always wonder how often it's happening when I'm not talking. Like how it might be striking silently when I just happen to not be speaking.
Whoa! So you're saying if there's some sort of noise in the signal when there's no signal, does it even make a sound?
These are questions I am not prepared to answer. But I will say, if you were looking at a 286S based on my talking about it, maybe hold off.
386 much better anyway. It's 32-bit. You get a floating point processor if you want. Better unit all around.
4 whole gigabytes of memory.
Yeah,
it's the future of computing.
Welcome to Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod. I'm Will.
I'm Brad.
Brad, I did something unwise for lunch today. We usually record like breakfast time, and today we're recording it just after lunch.
Yes.
And I went to the Asian market and bought ramen the other day. Okay. Because I like to go and get the you fancy lunchtime ramen, and I saw this stuff. I was like, oh, it's ramen. You can chuck it in a you cook it. And then you save a little bit of the noodle water and you pour some sauce in there and you kind of stir fry the noodles until it thickens up into a sauce.
Okay.
So that looks nice and that looks fancy. And we said it was spicy, but like spicy ramen, not that spicy. It was real spicy, Brad. So if I have to get up, run screaming from the room at any time,
yikes, just
be prepared.
I started to ask for what, but I think I'll leave that for just the listener to imagine.
So there's an occasional gurgle happening over here, but I think everything's fine.
Yep.
I should have known. I should have known because the little chicken on the package looked like he was very spicy. I think it's YouTube meme ramen, but I'm not sure. Anyway, it was delicious but hot.
I've got to the point where I try not to eat before anything on a microphone.
Well, you have some unique circumstances.
Yes, I've got some extenuating vocal issues, but still, also, just sometimes it just makes you logy, as well.
I mean, that's true. That's true. A big bowl of oatmeal first thing in the morning, and I'm like, oh man, I should have put an egg on that and had a little less of the oats.
Yep.
This week, speaking of a little less of something, we got, I don't know, I was going to call it a twofer, but it's a potential twofer because I think, as is our way, the first topic, the primary topic, ended up being more to it than we thought that there was going to be. So let's call it a one-fer with a potential bonus at the end.
Yes, but neither of us are subject matter experts, so maybe we'll see how deep into it we get.
Yeah, so a couple weeks ago, this Chinese LLM rolled out called
large
DeepSeek
language model.
People call it the AI.
You gotta peel back the onion here.
Yeah, I'm peeling onions here. It's an AI model from China, and it's actually it kind of threw the AI world into a little bit of a tizzy for like 4 days. And it's because
this was, to be clear, this was the day that the Nvidia stock cratered. If people are
so it was the 29th, I think, 2 weeks ago.
Plugged into AI news, but do remember the everybody running around on a Monday morning with their hair on fire, going like, "Oh God, the world is ending."
So yeah, they took a big hit. They lost $1 trillion in value or something ridiculous. It actually that dip hit the entire, pretty much everybody involved with AI in the US that has publicly traded stock. And the reason it's interesting, the reasons that happened are interesting. Now, before we go, I put this at the end, but I'm going to say it here. I don't think this means that the AI bubble is bursting yet, but it is like it's definitely an indicative of the problems with the current, generative AI market. And as we always say when we do these stories about generative AI, which I still think is kind of hooey, there's a lot of good work happening, even in the generative AI space. Like I talk to programmers all the time who are like, yeah, I really love like the code formatting and code structure, and like using generative AI to build unit tests and stuff like that is totally valid and makes human written code better and more reliable. That's fine.
Yeah, like, I mean, I certainly don't consider myself a programmer. I have programmed, but like for the little bit of code I do write, like I would never want it to generate the code for me myself, because writing it is the fun part to me, for one thing.
Yeah.
But the one thing I could see maybe at some point using it for is if I have a bug, or like there's something not working the way I expect it to, or something, like having it look at what I wrote and see if it can tell me or put me on the right track of, chasing down the problem. Like I could see something like that being acceptable to me.
Yeah, the building test is the perfect case study. So yeah, I mean, there was a thing that was going around the other day about pharmaceutical companies saying that the success rate on AI derived drug trials is like 20% higher than it is for traditional methods. So they're seeing 80 to 90% success rather than 60 to 70% success, which is like, that's good. It's good, like good use. Nice work, everybody.
Yeah.
The generative AI stuff, much like, well, we'll get to it.
I think generative media is I started to say like without value. Like I still feel that way. Like the only reason I stop myself is because that's a really absolute statement, and like maybe somebody could come up with a use case for it that might convince me otherwise. But like generating like video and imagery and music with it is not something that I find particularly useful. But more for more of this, like, I don't know, like what would you call these more text-based approach, and also like sort of task-based approaches, like the kind of, remember the example a few months ago of like, take a photo of your kid's calendar at school and have it generate an ICS file for you to dump into your calendar, like that kind of like task-based use for this sort of thing is actually like somewhat valuable if it works.
So that's all stuff that I've seen people do like pie in the sky demos of, and it never actually works in practice.
Sure.
So anyway, the point is, this DeepSeek thing rolled out and people lost their minds for a minute, and we wanted to talk about it because it's interesting why that happened. The kind of the high level answer is that they used a relatively small number of GPUs compared to what OpenAI and Anthropic and the other big AI companies in the US are using. They're less capable GPUs, which meant that their cost to train this model was a fraction of what a cost of like the OpenAI GPT-O2, I think, cost.
Yeah, like 6% of it, basically. Like,
well,
like
that's for GPT-4. O2 is probably more expensive than that.
Sure.
So yeah. So to give an idea of the numbers here, DeepSeek claimed they used 2048 NVIDIA H800s, which is a kind of stripped down export allowed version of the H100, and about $6 million in compute time to train R1.
Yeah, I looked it up. The NVIDIA H800 is still about just under $34,000 per card.
Yeah, they're expensive,
and so I think 34K by 2048 is somewhere around 6 million. So that's just cost of hardware, then, right?
Well, and probably electricity. The
maybe electricity's rolled into that.
I would assume so, but I don't know. Like data center time, I would assume is part of that whole cost, but I don't know. Sam Altman, who's the CEO of OpenAI, said that the cost to train GPT-4, which is kind of old at this point, was around 100 million, or just over $100 million, I think is the exact quote.
Yeah, was GPT-4 came out like 2 years ago or something like that?
Year and a half or something. Yeah.
Does that sound right? Before we get too much farther, do you want to talk about the export restrictions on NVIDIA hardware to China? Like I kind of knew that was a thing, but like, by what standard are they restricted? Do you know?
So I went and read the orders while we were setting up to do this today, and I am not able to tell from the orders as written. The orders that were written in the 2022 and the 2022 filing don't have a lot of technical details. They list model numbers, like generate, like They say that Ada chips couldn't be shipped, and they said that what was the one in between Ada and Blackwell?
There wasn't one.
What's the one before Ada then? I guess
Ampere. Are you talking in consumer or?
Yeah, it's a Hopper was before. Hopper is in between. Yeah, Grace Hopper.
Hopper is just a data center thing, though, right?
Just a data center chip. Yeah, so that's what the H100 and H800 are based on.
Okay.
It seems like they stripped down the memory bus some or something to make these export capable.
Yeah.
Also, some of these were shipped to China before the export restrictions came into play.
I see.
So.
I'll drop links for some of the articles we read to inform this episode into the show notes. But there was a Life Science article I read about this stuff, and they did say that NVIDIA designed the H800 partially
explicitly to bypass the export restrictions. Yeah,
right. But they didn't say by what metric it's doing so. I don't know if that's just a raw performance thing, or like you said, maybe it kind of seems like a classic example of like government tackling a very technical subject that it's not super well informed on and not documenting technical parameters very well.
Yeah, and I'm not a lawyer. I don't know what the rule how you usually write these things. My guess is that's a really difficult job, and it's why you're constantly adding to the requirements.
Sure.
But so that $6 million figure is disputed because there are a lot of like there's a big business in smuggling these GPUs into China. Mm-hmm. Apparently, people either set up shell corporations in countries that aren't embargoed and then move them across the border, or like I assume they're not like carrying 55 GPUs in their carry-on suitcase through customs, but who knows. The TLDR on the training side is that everybody freaked out because the assumption from OpenAI and Anthropic and the other US companies, including Microsoft and Oracle and all the people that are selling cloud compute to train these big models, is that like there wasn't efficiency to be gained here, that the way to make these things better was just by using brute force scaling, which means bigger data centers, more GPUs, more money training compute, training models. And the expectation is that maybe we don't need to invest in all these data centers and power plants to run the data centers, and we can just, do better math.
Right. And make some other tweaks that we'll get into to increase efficiency. I mean, it seems like whatever else you think about this technology, this is still a good development, because even if the functioning of the technology is suspect and the uses that it's going to be put to are also suspect as a result, like at least we're not going to melt the planet. Potentially.
Let's not
look. We're going to melt it more slowly than we were.
It means it'll get better as we melt it is the thing.
Fair.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because they're not going to stop building the data centers. They're just going to train even better, faster algorithms that lie more effectively to us. Anyway, the other big thing about this R1 model from DeepSeek is that it does what the OpenAI O models do, which is it uses chain of thought. Chain of thought is a term of art in the AI space that basically means the model is smart enough to break down complicated problems into more manageable, smaller problems. And one of the examples that they use for this is solving quadratic equations. So, like if you think about solving quadratic equations, it's like you have a variable squared plus or minus a variable the same variable multiplied, and then you have to like cancel out some of that variable, and you get to a number eventually. And the upshot is it'll show its work along the way. So it says, okay, first I do this, then I do this, then I do this, and the answer is this.
I saw this exact methodology applied to the strawberry problem.
What's the strawberry problem?
How many R's are there in strawberry? Because previous AI models have been very bad at answering that question, it turns out. I don't know if you've seen.
Yeah, no, I'm aware.
But I think this was just on Reddit. Somebody had put the question to the DeepSeek R1 model, and it eventually got it right, but it exposes its chain of thought, quote unquote. It kind of, in like a human readable way, you could read through all the steps it went through to try to count the R's. And like, to be fair, it took a shocking number of steps to figure out that there are 3 R's in strawberry, but it did at least get to the right answer, which is an improvement. But it was kind of interesting to like read it out step by step and see how it went through letter by letter and stopped itself halfway when it was about to answer. I think if I remember, I'd have to pull the text up. I think it was about to give the correct answer of 3 at one point and then stopped itself and second guessed and went back and performed a whole new methodology. But I guess you want that because that's error correcting, right? Like to check your own answers.
that's one of the things that the newer models do is they have multiple things going on at once, or it'll apply multiple models to the same problem and then like use yet another model to decide which of the kind of competing models are giving the right answer, right? So the other thing that's interesting about DeepSeek is that the company that made it owns its own data centers. So it spun out of a hedge fund, which uses machine learning to buy and to manage. I think it's like it is a boatload of money, but not a lot by hedge fund standards. Apparently it's like $6 billion.
That's practically a boutique.
Yeah, it kind of is practically a boutique. But the point is they were paying a lot of really smart people exclusively out of China to come in and do AI and machine learning math to make money with the hedge fund. And then they were like, oh, we have all these GPUs sitting here. Let's see what else we can do. And like, that's when they started working on this stuff. So it's interesting because they're not buying cloud compute time. Like OpenAI buys cloud compute time originally exclusively with Microsoft. And recently they expanded to include Oracle and some other stuff as well. But running on bare metal cluster versus cloud compute time, I think there's probably conversations happening in the Valley now about that, because it's a thing that we found, like game developers find the same thing too, right? Like your game server, this is something I know more about than AI shit. So when you're running game servers, if you typically buy some chunk of bare metal servers to provide your base level, because you can run way more instances of a game server on a bare metal machine than you can run on virtual machines running on the cloud, just because the overhead is way better. My assumption is the same thing happens here.
Sure. Let me tell you, as somebody who has a server sitting here in the corner of the room.
Yeah.
While everybody else is just paying for Dropbox accounts and VMs in some data center halfway across the country.
Yeah. Sometimes
there's just value to having your own hardware available.
Can't run a Valheim server on a Dropbox account. Anyway. So it's open also is the other thing.
That's like
kind of.
I mean, that is the most like explicitly and objectively noble part of this whole thing is
it's not noble. It's just them sticking the knives to OpenAI and Anthropic.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but it's still, it's nice to see somebody doing this. Somebody with this level of resources brought to bear on this problem, just putting it out there.
It's not open. It's not like open source. It's just like they're providing the models for download so you can run them on your own hardware.
Not the front end, or well, not front end's not the right word. Not the phase of it. The phase of it that resulted in its creation remains closed. Let's say, like all the code and the work they did to make the model is not something they opened, but the model itself is out there.
That's it. The training data, the code to train aren't available, so you can't replicate the work, but you can download the model and distill it to run on, like they have models that are distilled to run on local GPUs for people that have like 4090s, 4080s, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, you've got that 5090. Have you messed with it yet?
I have not downloaded it yet because, I've been busy doing other things.
I've thought about it, but I don't have a use for it. Like I don't really want to use it for practical purposes. Like I would mess with it for half an hour just to see how it worked. And then I would be like, okay, I'm still probably never going to trust anything you tell me. So
that's kind of where I end up.
Yeah.
But look, it's just like that startup. It's going to publish 8,600 books next year, all AI generated. People are going to eat them up.
Dude, it's been a while, but for a while, my Kindle, the unlock screen ad, like I've got the Kindle with ads, and when you go to unlock it, there's always a book ad on there.
Yep.
I am positive that every book that I was being served on those ads for like a good 6-month stretch had to all be completely generated. And not just the text, even like the cover art. Like I was getting a bunch of kids' books.
Oh yeah.
Every single one of those kids' books, even in the like kind of low res black and white Kindle screen context, I could still tell like there's no way a human generated this art.
Well, so this is the thing that's weird, right? Is the upshot on what they're doing is that their cost for accessing their models in the cloud is a 30th or a 50th, depending on which model you're comparing to, as the equivalent OpenAI machines.
Okay, so let me step back real quick and ask. So it was much more efficient to train and create this model, but are you saying it's also equally or similarly more efficient to run it as an end user?
Well, so yeah, when you're running against the big, so there's little models that you can run locally, right? But if you want to run against the real model, you're going to have to run that on a bigger machine than most people are going to have in their house. You're not going to have an H100 in your office.
Yeah, of course. But what I mean is in terms of like for like output, like to get the same quality and scale of output as you would get out of O1 or whatever.
Yeah, or O2.
Or O2, yeah, like whatever the current ChatGPT model is. For similar results, are you saying it's also more efficient at that scale?
I don't know if it's more efficient, but they're charging 1/50th what ChatGPT charges for O2 access.
Okay, then either it's much more efficient or this is a gigantic loss leader.
Yeah, so they're when you're doing AI stuff at scale, you buy tokens, you buy generated tokens, and those have a fixed cost, and like the price for the DeepSeek tokens is 1/50th. You can put $2 into your API account on DeepSeek and it lasts a really long time. The ups, like my assumption is that this has widened the door for people who are interested in building businesses off of creating a whole lot of low value content. And I think that the book spam is one of those models, but I think it's probably the least likely to succeed. I think the more likely is that we'll see that we're going to see people feeding whatever publicly available information they have about you, either from your cookie trail or your social stuff or whatever they can associate an advertiser or an advertisee. Like basically the cost is getting low enough that we're going to start seeing custom advertising generated by AI, if we aren't already, that's and or spam. Like that's where we're at. Because if you're looking at like your book thing, how many Amazon self-published AI generated books do they have to sell to customers to make that make their cost structure work? And if you're talking about the cost of advertising to the Kindle with ads load screen plus the cost of generating the book, like what's the percent? Like it's a simple spreadsheet problem to know that you're going to arbitrage out X amount of dollars on every book that you generate. And then they just hone in the books that are selling better. And it doesn't matter if people read them as long as they pay the $1 for them, or they get them into the Kindle Unlimited thing and they get a certain tiny amount of money per open or whatever.
Right.
Anyway,
right. This is a little bit of a sidebar here, although frankly, AI will absolutely be used in pursuit of this. But I'm getting the sense that we are getting closer and closer to the Minority Report style of personalized in-person advertising.
I mean, I think that's a real possibility now. I think it's much more likely that it's used for spam, though. I think there's a creepiness to the Minority Report. The Minority Report thing you're talking about, for people who don't remember the movie, is Tom Cruise walks into Banana Republic or The Gap or something, and it does an eye print on him.
Yeah.
And it says, "Oh, hey, Mr." I mean, he's actually gotten somebody else's eyeballs at this point, so it's not him. But
wait, does he have literal biological or organic eyeballs in his eyes? Or
yeah, they literally popped. He had some.
I forgot about that.
Like the way he could move off the grid was to have his eyeballs popped out and put some aftermarket eyeballs in from some dead guy.
I need to see a Minority Report again.
The movie's okay.
And I haven't seen it since the theater, so maybe it doesn't hold up super well. I don't know, but yeah, in that case, they were doing a retinal scan at range. But I need to read some more about this. But I saw a couple headlines pass recently about technology that I assume has probably existed in some form for a while, that they can use your cell phone pinging the cell network to triangulate your location at the resolution of like individual aisles in a grocery store now.
Mm-hmm.
And so they can literally map your movements through the grocery store and see where you spend the most time browsing. And the type of, this isn't even advertising, the type of customizability that they were proposing here was like adjusting prices up and down per customer. Like literally offering you massaging prices as you walk around the store based on your location and what they know about your shopping habits and your preferences and stuff.
This is why when Kroger started threatening to put price tags on and screens instead of physical price tags, people raised hell.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
The assumption is that, like, my assumption is that as the cost on this stuff goes down, it dramatically increases the amount of spam. Already, if you're looking for like what would have been a stock, a photographer taken or an illustrator drawn stock image 5-10 years ago, you can't find those anymore because there's so much AI crap.
Yeah.
Just crapping up those results.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to go to memes and look for nonsense because there's no, it's almost impossible to avoid unless you go specifically to a site that doesn't allow AI art. Like that's when you look at reviews, like high value review keywords. Like I think the example that somebody gave was air filters. There was a site that had done really good air filter reviews for like 10 years. And now vendors are selling review generating bots to places that don't care about their review integrity, like Marie Claire and like it was a lot of like home magazines and stuff like that. And then they'll have hidden pages that are linked invisibly and never exposed to the like the mainline real life consumer that just generates a bunch of air filter reviews off of things other people have said and Amazon reviews and whatever that may or may not be good, that generates affiliate revenue for those sites because their search traffic volume is good.
Snake is eating his own tail.
It's things are bad.
Mm-hmm. I think I said this on Discord, on one of the Discords you and I are on not very long ago. The cyberpunk authors did not go far enough.
No,
like they nailed it. Like, let's be real. Like they called it. They saw where things were going. They didn't see how far it was going to go.
We're like the idea. Look, the Franchulates and Snow Crash are up there, but anyway, we still need to read Neuromancer. We promised we said we're going to read Neuromancer at some point. I mean, we should do that.
Yeah,
it's going to seem quaint by comparison.
Oh, I believe it.
So they did it efficiently. The other thing that they did that was interesting is they did this really efficiently by they didn't use. Usually, you start with known good data and human reinforced training, right? So you start and you do the initial kind of cold start training with human feedback or human trained data that is labeled and marked and known good, and it takes a really long time to collect that data. And it's expensive and it's time consuming. They didn't do that. They just started training it and then did the reinforcement after the initial training pass, and then built another model on top of the first one with a very small, as I understand it, by training standards, amount of known good data for the cold start on the second rev of this model.
Now, I wonder, is that a situation where the model is able to take the much broader lessons that it's learned from that big bulk of data and compare against the kind of more known good results it's getting from the smaller set, and like retroactively learn more about what it got right and wrong on the main phase of the training from this kind of sub phase? Does that make sense?
Well, so remember, it's not learning, right? None of this is actually learning.
Well, no, I don't mean in like a sapient human sense, but like it is building a model, it's establishing parameters that it thinks are correct, where think just describes the process of this thing operating in a cold and calculating way. Like, I'm very clear this is not actually intelligence.
No, I know. I just like to be careful. It's finding adjacencies. It's finding things that are adjacent. Like it's finding relationships between things that it understands. And it's often developing that understanding by like abstracting out the information an additional layer so that it becomes so that like letters and words become numbers, and it knows that this number is usually adjacent to this number, right? And then it reverse translates those back into words. I don't know about the answer to your probably that sounds right, but a lot of the AI stuff is so deep. I can't believe I'm going to get roasted for complaining about this. There's so much fucking jargon and all this AI stuff that it's difficult to parse a lot of times, even for somebody with a pretty good understanding of what's going on. The base thing that's happening still with all of this is that they're mimicking the behavior of neurons in a neural net, which is a thing that has been able to be mathematically quantified to the point that you can run algorithms on GPUs at massive volume.
Yeah. See, I did not know that. Like, I guess this is kind of to your point about calling this artificial intelligence or describing what it's doing as thinking or whatever. Like, I didn't realize that like topographically it is similar to.
It's mimicking
a layout of neurons in a brain, like I didn't realize the correspondence was actually that direct. I mean, it may not be that direct, but you get what I'm saying.
I was gonna say it's not in a brain. It's in an artificial neural net. Okay. So in a brain, the connections are all 3-dimensional and they can loop back in on each other in really weird ways.
Okay.
In the artificial, as far as I know, they're still mimicking 2D neural nets that only loop back onto each other in a planar way, not in a 3-dimensional way.
Sure. Okay.
And yeah, anyway. I did my senior dissertation on this in college about 25 years ago, 30 years ago. And it was I don't remember any of the important things at this point, it turns out. And also it was mostly theoretical. And it was like at the time people were lining up like dozens or hundreds of neurons on plates and then feeding signals into them to see what happened.
Yeah.
So anyway,
yeah, I wonder. That actually makes me wonder. I'm sure this is well established at this point, but is neural net potentially why people started calling this artificial intelligence? Do you think?
No, they started calling it artificial intelligence because it makes people understand what that means, and they don't understand what a neural net is.
Fair. Machine learning does not have the same ring.
Well, yeah, I mean, and machine learning is what it is, right?
Yeah.
So the other thing that they did is they're using, because they're running on bare hardware, I assume. They were able to run it's not exactly, but kind of the equivalent of assembly code for these GPUs. They're running NVIDIA's parallel thread execution, which they call PTX instead of CUDA. So it's one step removed, less abstracted, I guess.
My understanding of that stuff, this is basically what you just said, but from reading people talking about this on Twitter who seem to know what they're talking about, like it's kind of like you can kind of look at CUDA as equivalent to C or C++, and PTX is assembly language, like you said. But so CUDA is pretty close to the metal, but not as close as doing hand optimizations of this nature.
And like those hand optimizations are like using 8-bit stuff where 8-bit math makes sense, and using 32-bit when you need the extra precision, stuff like that.
What I read about that stuff is that the previous models trained by OpenAI and companies like that are pretty purely 32-bit or predominantly so.
That sounds expensive.
I think that's for the weighting between neurons, if I understood. Ask me anything about this technology, but I believe what I read was where DeepSeek moved to 8-bit precision, and that we're talking about precision on these types of numbers. It's basically just how big the numbers can be, right? Or
how accurate.
In the context of a decimal, in the context of a decimal number, more how many decimal places you can have rather than how big the number can be.
Look, it's all just simple formulas, Brad. I just pasted one into chat for you so you can see. It's just work that out, and that's the secret of AI. It's just that simple.
Yep. I don't.
Yet.
I'm sorry. I'm really looking here. There are next to no numerals in this equation.
A lot of pies.
I see a numeral. Let's see. I see 3 different instances of a numeral 1.
Yeah.
And I'm looking. Let's see. There's a superscript 1, and that's about it. Every other element in this equation besides that is something other than a standard number.
It's a lot.
Yeah. Anyway, the weights. I believe the weights between neurons is, if I understood correctly, is where they reduced the precision down to 8-bit.
That makes sense.
Apparently that does, as you might imagine, it does decrease the accuracy of the model slightly, but apparently the trade-off in extra speed they gained and extra savings on training compute requirements were more than worth it.
Well, and then, so there's one other theory about how they did this so efficiently, which was OpenAI says that they have evidence from Microsoft that someone was extracting large amounts of data from the model as if they were doing a process called distillation to basically steal the gist of I think the O1 or O2 model. I'm not sure which one. And they were, I'm going to go and tell you, fairly upset about this, which is pretty rich to me, given that they trained all of their models on the entirety of the open web that they scraped a few years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, the distinction here, and I'm not defending OpenAI, this is a distinction from a technical perspective, not an ethical one. But the distinction here is that they did take a mass quantity of raw data that, yes, again, they did lift from people without permission, but they did do some amount of processing on it to make it more usable, I guess, for DeepSeek's purposes.
Stealing is fine as long as you don't steal from us, Brad. That's the takeaway I have here.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're not really in a position to evaluate how capable this stuff is. The general consensus among the AI experts that I follow and trust is that it seems about as good as ChatGPT O2. The cost structure is dramatically better. It's wildly popular as a result right out the gate. It was the #1 app on iOS the day that this announcement hit. Free app.
Is that, I assume that app is just an interface to a cloud instance, right?
It's an interface for a cloud instance. Yeah.
I assume no matter how much neural hardware is on an iPhone, I assume it couldn't even run the smallest version of this.
I think that I would say you could probably distill it down to the point that you get something that you're not going to want to run on it. But yeah.
Yeah, that would make sense. It's available on PC. I know you said you hadn't messed with it. Olama offers it.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with Olama? Like
yeah, Olama is a tool that you use to, but the Olama thing is a cloud front end, I think.
No, you can also download and run stuff locally with it. They let you pick models. That was going around widely, like the day this released or this news came out, was they're like, hey, it's already built in here. You can just download this and run it. But I started to grab it. A, like I said, not a lot of interest. B, there's kind of an epidemic, I feel like, in a lot of open source software these days, where there's just a very conspicuous lack of a top line statement of, hey, this is what this is.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of that.
Like there are a lot of projects that I run into these days that just like could really use 2 sentences at the top that just like explicitly say, hey, this is an interface to this, this is a thing that will let you use this underlying technology, or this does, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, like sometimes it's not clear where in the ecosystem or the stack a thing sits that you're about to download and run, which makes it harder to use something if you don't know exactly what its purpose is.
Well, it's funny because the last time I downloaded Olama, I'm pretty sure it just interfaced with the web versions of the models.
I think it does both, to be clear. But
that makes sense.
You can run DeepSeek and some other stuff locally.
Oh man, I'm going to turn some fans on.
Yeah, in fact, if you go to olama.com, wait, are you running it right now?
I'm installing it right now.
Wait, which version? The Windows one?
The Windows one.
Oh, okay. Yeah, if you go to there, if you go to olama.com, it says, run Llama 3.3, which Llama is Facebook's model. Is that right? Yeah. DeepSeek R1, Mistral, Gemma 2, and other models locally.
That sounds fun.
Yeah, I don't know.
So one of the other things that happened as a result of this is that there was multiple bills submitted to Congress in different houses about the varying levels of illegality that they want to make DeepSeek. Mm-hmm. There's a bipartisan bill from Representatives Josh Gottheimer and Darren LaHood in the House to ban its use on government devices, which seems wise because there is a fair amount of concern that especially using the cloud version is going to leak sensitive data back to China, which is probably against the best interest of the United States for a whole multitude of reasons. Mm-hmm. Josh Hawley in the Senate, who's kind of noted reactionary, introduced a law that would allow enormous civil and criminal penalties for installing DeepSeek for anybody or any other Chinese AI technology if you're in the US.
Seems pretty broad.
Yeah, it seemed like that would be a problem in the long term. But anyway, don't know what's going to happen with either of those. It seems like the status of new legislation in the United States legislature is fraught right now for reasons.
Yes, to the extent that we still have a legislature.
Yeah. And like I said up front, I don't think this means the AI bubble is bursting. I think people are reevaluating their assumptions. I don't like it. It definitely removed a lot of value from the stock market. I think the next question is what's going to happen when OpenAI runs out of money and has to go out with their hat in their hand, and who's going to keep pumping money into their system if they don't show more responsible spending. Like I wonder, I know I have had multiple conversations with venture folks, not at the level that OpenAI would be talking to people, but when you say, hey, I want to run metal servers, they look at you like you're a crazy person. And the result, because if you're building, if you made a bunch of money on apps 15 years ago, that business was basically AWS, the invention of Amazon Web Services, which is a cloud-based way to virtualize computer hardware.
It's the way. To be clear, it's well, I don't mean in the sense that it's the only one, but it is as far as I know, still far and away the biggest one.
I know less so these days than before, but
I know Microsoft's Azure is, I think, still number 2. It's quite big too, of course, but AWS was the first and by far the biggest.
Yeah, AWS invented this whole concept, right?
That's what I meant.
And the thing that just to be clear, they didn't invent the concept of virtualizing machines. What they invented was the idea of selling bits and pieces of virtualized machines as individual services. So you could buy storage and compute and deep long-term storage and databases and all of these other things separately.
Yeah, and making that easy to automate and spin up piecemeal as it's required, and not have a bunch of servers sitting there idle when you don't need them.
Yeah, there's a reason that sometime around 2012, you stopped having the thing where like something going massively viral would take down the website. And it's because everybody started putting these servers in front of your web servers that would just spin up more servers on Amazon if you needed them for 10 minutes, and then it would spin them back down when the traffic surge went away. And so like it wouldn't surprise me, given the Valley's love of cloud compute, if nobody ever said, hey, what if we built our own data centers? Well, then we'd own the hardware, and that would be a problem, because then we'd have a bunch of old hardware every 5 years that we'd have to figure out what to do with, or upgrade the capital cost on the data centers. But like Facebook has a shitload of data centers. Twitter, Google have a shitload of data centers. Apple has a lot of data centers. It's surprising to me that like the OpenAI and Anthropic are buying access to these computers rather than just building the data centers themselves. Anyway, I think there's going to be conversations about that.
Do you think that speaks to their business trajectory? Or
I think, look, if they want to do these if they wanted to building data centers, as Google found out the hard way for the first 10 years of the 2000s, is difficult, right? Their solution, Google's solution at the time, was to just make the computers that they were putting in there as cheap as possible and run Linux on them in such a way that it would just kind of work, even if the machines were janky and started failing, and then track the failures and make sure you replicate enough that the failures don't take anything down. Unfortunately, with the AI stuff, they can't do that, because the only way they can get the GPUs is to buy, $50,000 GPUs from NVIDIA, and those come in $350,000 boxes that then you put like 800 of those GPUs in a rack or whatever, and you have to have enormous cooling and enormous power. And like in order to build like a GPU data center at this point, you have to basically design the data center from the ground up to accommodate the power and cooling requirements.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can definitely see what a Herculean task it would be. I guess what I meant by business trajectory is like, does this speak to what kind of company OpenAI wants to be, or what their end goal is? Because I would think they would be tripping over themselves to own their own data centers, because they wanted to be the provider of this technology to every other company on the planet, in the same way that AWS is for basic cloud compute, right?
People often talk about capital efficiency, and in startup world, that often means you don't bite off more things than you can chew. So if they're focused on building models, they might say, look, we're going to spend more money on data, like training models right now, because we're buying that resource, but it's cheaper than us building up a 3,000 employee division that's just building data centers around the world.
Yeah. And to be fair, my example was really putting the cart before the horse, because they need to prove sustainable demand to what they have before they go building the infrastructure to provide it. And I don't think there's there's no evidence that there's going to be long-term sustainable demand for this technology yet, right?
Yeah, and that's what that's the thing. Even the places where they're charging large dollar tickets for lots of tokens, they're still not breaking even on the cost of generating those tokens for OpenAI, at least in the last announcement that they had about that stuff. So like, that's ultimately going to be what pops the bubble, is that, Microsoft has Copilot, and they recently made Copilot free for a whole swath of customers that used to have to pay have to subscribe to an extra tier of their licensing provider to get Copilot access. And like, if people aren't using Copilot, if there's no viable use for Copilot, then like, what's the point of generating all these tokens, right? Anyway, so that's it. That's the DeepSeek kind of, I don't know. It's like a quick look for this weird thing that happened.
Sure. From some people who have played the game for 20 minutes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like the data, like, we've been paying attention to the AI stuff enough to know what's going on with it. The hard part for me about talking about AI stuff is that the places that cover it and are doing a good job tend to go from high level overview to terrifying formulas in like 3 paragraphs. Mm-hmm. And, a lot of it is difficult to, if you don't understand the basic math, I say the basic math, but it's not basic math. If you don't understand the math that's underlying the entire technology, you quickly can get out of your depth. And there are a handful of people doing a really good job talking about this. Ed Zitron is fantastic. The Hackaday folks have good explainers about it regularly. I think 404 Media had some good stuff that I read leading up to this.
Yeah.
We'll put links for the stuff that we talked about in the notes, though.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's probably it.
Yeah, that's it. Did we even say what the other topic was going to be? It was tariffs.
Bonus topic.
It was the bonus topic is going to be tariffs, but actually maybe it's not a topic anymore because they seem to have backpedaled on just about everything. Well, I guess the China tariffs are still in place, right?
Everything got pushed back except for the China tariffs right now. And I don't know what's up with Taiwan. I think he threatened the Taiwan tariffs, but hasn't actually applied them.
That was a bunch of loose talk as far as I know, whereas all the others have been signed. The Taiwan ones are by far the most insane to me. Both the targeting and the scale of them. Like Taiwan is.
Well, they make the chips.
They make the chip. I mean, but also just geopolitically, I think they're still an ally of ours, right? But that doesn't mean shit anymore. But the other thing is up to 100% tariffs is what was being quoted.
Well, okay, so when we talk about tariffs, I like to go read economists. I went and read some economists, and the big thing that I saw is that labor but it's cheaper to build fabs in Taiwan. It's a little bit less stable because of the earthquake zone that they're in and the whole mainland China not liking Taiwan situation. But the labor for chip engineers in Taiwan is roughly, in the US, roughly costs 3.5 times what an equivalent engineer costs in Taiwan. So cost of building the fabs, cost of staffing the fabs, cost of running the fabs because of EPA and power and water in the places that we build fabs in the US is a lot more too. So one of the economists, when we were reading about the tariff stuff, the general consensus is this kind of broad sweeping tariff without any kind of thoughtfulness about the rollout. It's impossible to know what the impact is going to be in the long term.
Yeah. Yeah, to the point that I think even if they hadn't backpedaled on a lot of these policies or at least delayed them for a month or whatever it is, trying to cover this with any kind of coherency is a fool's errand anyway, because it will assuredly all be out of date by the time this episode runs.
Yeah, the nice thing about the tariffs about for the NVIDIA folks and all the other AI companies that lost a bunch of money is the tariff stuff rolled out the next day and completely erased those losses. So you didn't even notice that there was a dip the day before. The one of the economists I read said it might just be cheaper to pay the tariffs and keep buying stuff from Taiwan because the pipeline on new fabs, which we talked about a few weeks ago, is 4 years minimum.
Yeah.
And the cost of building the fabs has almost destroyed Intel. They've spent so much money spinning up US manufacturing over the last 5 years that it's weakened their entire business as a whole while they wait for these enormous long-term investments to come to fruition. So yeah, if you don't want to put your business at risk, you might be better off just paying the tariffs. Although Samsung and TSMC and a bunch of other places are building fabs here. So
yeah. Anyway. There were all kinds of other subtopics to address here. The U.S. Postal Service was blocking all shipments from China and Hong Kong for what turned out to be something like 12 hours. So that was going to cause a massive disruption in the kind of small boutique name electronics field, from AliExpress and stuff like that. But that is no longer the case.
The handheld people were flipping out on my subreddits.
Yes, your Aya Neos out there were seeing their business model challenged pretty quickly.
Look, I'm a staunch proponent of the Treaty of Berne, which has regulated international mail since 1874.
Yeah.
Without that, we'd have to have individual treaties with all of the other countries in the world, which is it's just unworkable.
The Ulysses S. Grant was a big handheld gaming guy.
He loved getting mail. He loved getting international mail.
Was that 1870? My late 19th century presidents are a bit of a jumble.
1874 is that would be in that. It's somewhere in there. Grover Cleveland, one of those guys.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, the big thing on the small package is that there's an exception for things that cost less than $800 shipped from China, so you don't have to pay any kind of duty or tariffs or anything on those coming in from the US.
Is that the de minimis?
That's the de minimis
clause or policy.
Yeah, and
whenever there's a Latin name on it, it's serious.
Well, when that went into effect, it wasn't really a problem, and then. Shine and Temu and AliExpress and all those places have started using that as a way to bypass paying tariffs on their entire business, duties on their entire business.
Yeah.
So anyway, we'll see how that goes.
Maybe we'll revisit this topic more comprehensively when it actually settles down and if it ever actually even comes to pass.
Yeah, the upshot from everything that I was able to read for electronic stuff is that no one knows what the impact of a 25% flat tariff on China, and no one really no one knows what 100% impact on Taiwan, except for that it's probably going to be more, the cost increases will probably be more than the bill of goods times the tariffs, plus the individual line items on the bill of goods times the tariffs that are affected by each of the items on the bill of goods added up. It's going to be more than that.
More than that still. Yeah, I can see that.
Because there's like middlemen in the way that take extra money and stuff like that. Anyway.
Fun times.
Yeah. Elections matter. That's the TLDR.
Mm-hmm.
This is the time where we thank our patrons, Brad.
It is. Thank you, patrons.
Thank you, patrons. We really appreciate you. As always, Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod is a listener-supported show. That means we wouldn't be here without you, the listener. And for $5 a month, you can get access to the fabulous Tech Pod Discord, which is full of nerds who talk about things like duty on handheld gaming devices and keyboards and audio interfaces and Brad's janky compressor / limiter.
Yep.
Sorry, Brad. Yep. I think I talked about the spicy ramen in there this morning.
You probably did. I'm so mad about this thing, man.
I'm sorry. That sucks because you did a fair amount of research on it too.
Yeah,
that's
it was. I mean, this thing was spoken quite highly of. It's just, to me though, it's like a design flaw is one thing, but just cheaping out on manufacturing, like having it be crappy because you just didn't want to pay. I mean, you tell me.
Look, if you want to talk about
extra per unit, even $5 extra per unit or whatever it would have cost to, make the tooling such that this thing would come out of the factory ready to go consistently. Like, come on.
If you want to talk about cheaping out on manufacturing, I can tell you about the A.O. Smith water heater company, Brad.
Oh.
I had don't ever buy water heaters at Lowe's. This is the TLDR.
Okay.
They sell a variety of brands like Maytag and Whirlpool and stuff like that. Apparently ours was, despite having filled out the warranty card so we'd get notifications of recalls, ours was under recall. And I found this out because I went out to the garage the other day and it was making sounds like a motorcycle that was backfiring.
Oh my.
And then when I looked at it, there was fire coming out of the hole where the gas goes in, which is not what you want.
How long ago did the recall go into effect?
Like 6 years.
Ooh.
So I called them and they were like, oh yeah, it's under recall. We'll send you a part and then pay to fix it. And I had already called the water heater person who repairs our water, who deals with our water heater usually. They came out and I was like, how dangerous is he? He's like, I wouldn't have one of these in my house. I was like, well, of course you wouldn't, because you're trying to sell me a hot water heater. But then, so I got a quote and I let him go back to the car and I was like, and I started looking up what had happened to the water heaters that caused a water heater recall for every water heater made by this company for X period of years. And then I called them back and was like, hey, can you come put the other water heater in? So I got a new water heater yesterday afternoon. Okay. And that's the other thing that your subscription dollars support is my new water heater.
Oh, not free of charge. To be clear.
No, I had to pay $2,500, $2,400. It was fucking expensive.
I'm sorry. I may have zoned out for a second. I thought you were saying that the company with the faulty water heater was replacing them.
Yes, they were going to, but it's also 10 years old and there's about a 10-year lifespan on water heaters usually.
I see.
So I was like, let's just fucking do it rather than have the water heater go out again in 2 months.
Got it.
And also I don't know that I trust the company that was blowing up people's houses with their shitty designs.
Yeah, fair.
Anyway. So yeah, we appreciate every patron, everybody who listens, but especially our patrons. And you can find out how to support the podcast by going to patreon.com/techpod. Again, that's patreon.com/techpod. And for $5 a month, you get access to the Discord. You get access to the patron exclusive episode where we talk about stuff and things.
Mm-hmm.
Last month, people really, it was very divisive. Some people not a fan. Some people really enjoyed just the us sitting around talking about stuff.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
let us know where you ended up, I guess.
Did you say that? I'm sitting here second guessing my part in what you just described, which was substantial.
I mean, look, usually I'm the one who rambles, so it's only fair that you do it occasionally.
It was a lot of a haphazard stream of consciousness about UEFI and secure boots and drive encryption. Various related.
Best to leave the mystery on the exact contents of the rambling.
Yeah. So hopefully maybe that'll cohere into a full episode at some point. I think I'm going to finally put Refind on this weekend. And
in
fact, I put my spare SSD in the machine yesterday. So
it's all happening.
It's all down to the software end now. I might install a Linux or two this weekend.
I think the next step is to the other thing we need to do is the what are they called? The non-carrier carriers. The phone carriers who don't own their MVNOs. Yeah. I want to know more about MVNOs.
Mobile virtual network operator, I believe.
That's it. Yeah, I love
switched.
No, I know.
I switched. I'm on a new carrier now. Well, I'm on one of those.
Yeah, well, I think we should break kids. When I looked at the offers on those, they are all over the place.
There's quite a bit going on there.
It's wild. Yeah.
Can I tell you something?
Yeah.
I'm still in the free trial period with one I picked.
Yeah.
It might work out. I haven't picked a plan yet. It may work out that my phone bill is going to be $10 a month.
The thing I want to know more than anything else is what it is that we're losing, because they're so dramatically cheaper than the Verizon and AT&Ts of the world.
I have suspicions. I don't know if they can account for a reduction of that magnitude, but
yeah,
maybe I don't want to burn all the material right now though.
Yeah, no. But if people have thoughts about MVNOs, send them in too, please. Yeah. Again, the address is, this is the rambliest outro we've ever done. Patreon.com/techbod. As always, we appreciate everybody's support. We especially appreciate our executive producer tier patrons, including Andrew Slosky, Jordan Lippett, Bunny Felonies, Twinkle Twinkie, David Allen, James Kamek, and Pantheon, makers of the HS3 high-speed 3D printer. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
And that'll do it for us this week, Brad. Mm-hmm. Good luck with your compressor.
Yeah.
And we will see you all next week.